The biopic Michael chronicles MJ's rise to global fame, starting from the discovery of the Jackson 5 to his transition into a solo artist. And fun fact, Jaafar Jackson, who plays Michael in the film, is a late singer's nephew.
Nobody expected the biggest mystery surrounding the new Michael Jackson film to have anything to do with the actor playing him. Before audiences argued about the story, before critics debated the performances, and before the movie even reached theaters, one question had already taken over social media. People weren't asking whether the film would be successful. They were asking something much stranger. How could one person disappear so completely into the image of Michael Jackson that millions of viewers had to look twice just to convince themselves they weren't watching the king of pop himself? Some believed it was artificial intelligence. Others insisted Hollywood had relied on expensive digital effects. A few even claimed old footage had been blended into the film. But the Rehearsal story turned out to be far more unbelievable than any online theory. Hidden behind every frame of the trailer was a transformation that had quietly been unfolding for years, long before anyone outside the production knew it existed. What audiences eventually witnessed wasn't the result of computer magic. It was the result of obsession, discipline, sacrifice, and a challenge that most actors would have refused from the very beginning. When the world first heard that Michael Jackson's life would finally receive the big screen treatment, excitement was immediately followed by fear. Bringing the life of one of history's most recognizable entertainers to cinema sounded almost impossible. Michael wasn't simply a singer with a collection of hit songs. He was a global phenomenon whose voice, appearance, dance style, personality, and stage presence had become part of popular culture. Generations had grown up watching his performances repeatedly, studying every movement until they became unforgettable. That created a problem unlike almost any other biographical film in Hollywood. Audiences wouldn't simply watch the actor. They would compare every second of the performance against decades of memories already locked inside their minds. One inaccurate expression could become a headline. One awkward dance step could dominate social media. The margin for error was almost non-existent. Inside Hollywood, speculation began immediately. Producers, casting directors, journalists, and fans all started throwing around names. Experienced actors were suggested. Professional dancers entered the conversation. Well-known performers with years of film experience were rumored to be in consideration. Then another name quietly surfaced, one that instantly divided opinion. Jaafar Jackson, the nephew of Michael Jackson. To some people, the choice seemed obvious. To others, it felt like Hollywood taking the safest possible option. Critics questioned whether family connection would outweigh talent. Before Jaafar had even performed a single scene, thousands of people had already formed opinions about him. The internet reached a verdict long before filming had properly begun. Some believed he would never escape accusations of nepotism. Others insisted nobody outside the Jackson family could ever understand Michael deeply enough to portray him honestly. The debate continued for months while Jaafar remained almost completely silent. That silence would eventually become one of his greatest strengths. While social media argued endlessly about whether he deserved the opportunity, Jaafar wasn't participating in interviews or defending himself online. He wasn't trying to convince strangers with carefully written statements. Instead, he disappeared into preparation. Every day became another step toward solving an impossible puzzle. The challenge wasn't learning famous dance moves because millions of people could imitate Michael Jackson's choreography. The real challenge was understanding why Michael moved the way he did. What emotions lived underneath those famous performances? What thoughts shaped the quiet moments between concerts? How did one human being become the most recognizable performer on the planet while carrying enormous pressure behind the scenes? Those questions demanded far more than simple imitation. The first stage of the transformation had nothing to do with appearance. Before costumes, before makeup, before rehearsals on recreated concert stages, Jaafar focused on something audiences would never consciously notice. Observation. He watched interviews that most fans had forgotten. He studied backstage footage where Michael wasn't performing for cameras. He paid attention to moments of silence instead of moments filled with applause. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. Michael's public image contained incredible confidence, but away from massive crowds there were moments of softness, careful thought, and quiet humility. Those contrasts fascinated Jaafar because they revealed a complete human being rather than an untouchable superstar. He realized audiences would never believe the performance if they only saw the icon. They needed to see the man behind the legend. As preparation intensified, ordinary routines disappeared. Every movement started receiving attention. Walking across a room became an exercise in observation. Standing still required adjustment. Even simple conversations became opportunities to practice posture, rhythm, and body language. Friends reportedly noticed subtle differences long before filming started. Without realizing it, Jaafar had begun replacing familiar habits with entirely new ones. Transformation rarely happens through one dramatic moment. It arrives quietly through thousands of tiny decisions repeated over and over again until they become second nature. That invisible process consumed months before anyone outside the production witnessed a single result. Meanwhile, another battle was unfolding inside his own mind. Family connection brought advantages, but it also created emotional weight that outsiders rarely considered. This wasn't just another historical figure from a textbook. Michael Jackson had been part of his family's everyday life. Memories weren't borrowed from documentaries. They were personal. That made every rehearsal emotionally complicated because he wasn't recreating a stranger's life. He was revisiting moments connected to someone whose absence continued to shape the entire Jackson family. Balancing personal emotion with professional responsibility demanded remarkable maturity. He couldn't allow grief, admiration, or pressure to overwhelm the performance. Everything had to remain truthful. Then came dance training. Many viewers assume the moonwalk represents the hardest part of portraying Michael Jackson, but experienced choreographers often explain that the dance itself isn't what makes Michael unforgettable. Countless professionals can perform technically accurate versions of his routines. What separated Michael from everyone else was timing. He knew exactly when to pause, when to explode with energy, and when complete stillness could create more excitement than movement itself. Those instincts couldn't be memorized from choreography books. They had to be developed through relentless repetition. Jaafar spent countless hours refining those invisible details because audiences would instinctively recognize whether the performance felt alive or merely rehearsed. Voice training presented another challenge altogether. Michael Jackson possessed a speaking style unlike anyone else in entertainment. Gentle, controlled, thoughtful, and instantly recognizable. Rather than attempting an exaggerated impression, vocal coaches encouraged Jaafar to understand the emotional intention behind every sentence. They focused on breathing, pacing, rhythm, and natural delivery instead of mimicry. Gradually, the performance stopped sounding like someone trying to imitate Michael. It began sounding like a person who genuinely understood him. Perhaps the biggest turning point arrived during the first complete wardrobe and makeup test. For months, everyone had concentrated on movement, acting, and emotional preparation. Now, for the first time, every element came together. Costume designers recreated iconic outfits with remarkable precision. Makeup artists spent hours enhancing subtle facial similarities instead of hiding them beneath heavy prosthetics. Hairstylists completed the final details. Then Jaafar looked into the mirror. According to people involved with the production, the room fell unusually quiet. It wasn't simply because he resembled Michael. It was because the performance had finally caught up with the appearance. The familiar posture, carefully practiced expressions, and natural confidence suddenly merged into something unexpectedly convincing. Even crew members who had watched rehearsals for months reportedly reacted differently after seeing the complete transformation. That moment marked the beginning of a completely different phase. Preparation was ending. Judgment was about to begin. Very soon, millions of strangers would witness the same image for the very first time. They wouldn't know about the months of exhausting rehearsals. They wouldn't see the frustration hidden behind failed attempts or the discipline required to rebuild ordinary habits from the ground up. They would only see the finished performance and decide within seconds whether they believed it. The internet had already formed opinions long before the trailer arrived. Now it was finally time to discover whether those opinions would survive when the first teaser finally appeared online. Something unusual happened within minutes. Instead of discussing the movie itself, people became obsessed with a single person. Frame by frame, Viewers paused the trailer, zoomed in on screenshots, and replayed the same few seconds repeatedly. Social media feeds filled with side-by-side comparisons of Jaafar Jackson and Michael Jackson. Some viewers insisted there had to be digital face replacement involved. Others believed advanced visual effects were responsible for creating the illusion. The comments section turned into a debate that stretched across every platform imaginable. Yet the production team remained remarkably quiet, allowing the footage to speak for itself. Ironically, that silence only made the mystery even bigger. Every day new theories appeared, and with every new theory, curiosity surrounding the film continued to grow. What most people didn't realize was that the hardest part of Jaafar's journey had already happened long before the trailer reached the public. Cameras captured only the finished performance, but they never captured the exhausting repetition behind it. Day after day, he repeated the same dance sequences until every movement became instinctive. Scenes that lasted only a few seconds on screen sometimes demanded countless rehearsals before they finally felt natural. The physical exhaustion was enormous, but the mental challenge proved even greater. Playing Michael Jackson wasn't simply about remembering choreography or dialogue. It required carrying the emotional weight of someone whose life constantly shifted between unimaginable success and relentless public attention. That emotional complexity couldn't be created with makeup. It had to come from within. As filming continued, the cast and crew reportedly witnessed an interesting transformation. During the earliest rehearsals, everyone naturally saw Jaafar as himself. They spoke with him casually between takes and treated the role like any other production. But as the weeks passed, subtle changes began affecting the atmosphere on set. The familiar smile, the posture, the graceful movements, and the quiet confidence slowly became so convincing that there were moments when people instinctively reacted as though Michael himself had walked into the room. Those brief moments didn't happen because anyone forgot reality. They happened because Jaafar had reached a point where every small detail finally worked together. The illusion wasn't created by one spectacular dance move. It was created by hundreds of tiny decisions executed with consistency. The greatest challenge arrived whenever production recreated performances that millions of fans already knew by heart. Unlike fictional films, there was no creative freedom to reinvent history. Every concert scene represented a memory shared by audiences across generations. Fans had watched those performances for decades. They knew exactly when Michael raised his hand, where he paused, how he smiled, and even how he looked toward the audience before beginning certain songs. One inaccurate movement would immediately stand out. That reality created incredible pressure because perfection wasn't measured against imagination. It was measured against history itself. Despite those expectations, Jaafar never appeared interested in competing with Michael's legacy. Throughout interviews, he consistently emphasized respect over imitation. He understood that replacing Michael Jackson was impossible because no performer could ever duplicate the original. Instead, his responsibility was to honor the spirit behind those unforgettable performances while introducing them to audiences in a fresh cinematic experience. That difference became essential. Rather than chasing impossible comparisons, he focused on authenticity. The more honestly he approached the role, the stronger the performance became. Another fascinating aspect of the transformation involved confidence. Before receiving the role, Jaafar lived a relatively private creative life. Although music had always surrounded him, worldwide attention had not. Suddenly, he found himself standing at the center of one of Hollywood's most anticipated productions. Every interview generated headlines. Every public appearance attracted cameras. Every photograph circulated across social media within minutes. Many young performers struggle under that level of scrutiny, but Jaafar approached it with remarkable calm. Perhaps years of growing up inside one of the world's most famous families had quietly prepared him for exactly this moment. Fame wasn't new to the Jackson family. Responsibility wasn't new either. As anticipation continued building, longtime Michael Jackson fans became increasingly emotional. For many, the project represented far more than another movie. It was an opportunity to revisit memories connected to childhood, family, music, and unforgettable performances that had shaped their lives. Some approached the film with excitement, while others remained protective of Michael's legacy. Both reactions came from the same place, deep admiration for the artist. Jaafar understood that emotional connection better than most because he had experienced it personally throughout his own life. Rather than viewing skeptical fans as critics, he viewed them as people who genuinely cared about preserving Michael's memory. When early reactions finally began emerging, one observation appeared repeatedly. Viewers praised not only the physical resemblance but also the emotional sincerity of the performance. Many commented that certain scenes captured Michael's quiet humanity just as effectively as his famous stage presence. That response mattered enormously because it confirmed the central idea guiding Jaafar's preparation from the very beginning. Looking like Michael might capture attention for a few seconds, but understanding him emotionally was what kept audiences invested throughout the story. The project also created unexpected opportunities for younger generations to discover Michael Jackson all over again. Streaming platforms reported renewed interest in classic albums. Concert footage reached millions of first-time viewers. Interviews recorded decades earlier suddenly found entirely new audiences. Teachers, musicians, dancers, and entertainers began discussing Michael's artistic influence with renewed enthusiasm. In that sense, the film accomplished something beyond entertainment. It reopened conversations about creativity, performance, discipline, and the extraordinary impact one artist can have across generations. For Jaafar personally, the experience became a defining chapter rather than a final destination. Before the film, many people knew him only because of his famous surname. Afterward, audiences increasingly recognized the determination that existed behind the family connection. He had demonstrated something that Hollywood values deeply: the willingness to disappear completely inside a demanding role. Whether future projects involve music, acting, or entirely different creative pursuits, that reputation for commitment will likely follow him throughout his career. Looking back, perhaps the most powerful lesson hidden within this journey isn't about celebrity at all. It's about preparation. Modern audiences often celebrate overnight success while overlooking the invisible years that make success possible. Jaafar's transformation reminds us that extraordinary achievements almost always begin quietly. They start inside rehearsal rooms, empty studios, long practice sessions, and moments when nobody is watching. By the time the public finally notices remarkable work, countless hours of dedication have already passed unnoticed. In the end, the real story isn't simply that Jaafar Jackson managed to resemble Michael Jackson. Technology alone can create convincing appearances. Makeup can alter faces. Costumes can recreate iconic images. Visual effects can enhance almost anything. What technology cannot manufacture is emotional honesty. It cannot create discipline, humility, patience, or genuine respect for the person being portrayed. Those qualities had to come directly from Jaafar himself. They were built through months of relentless effort and a willingness to accept one of the most intimidating responsibilities an actor could ever face. Years from now, audiences may continue debating where this performance belongs among Hollywood's greatest biographical portrayals. Critics will compare it with other legendary performances, while fans will continue discussing their favorite scenes. But one thing is already impossible to deny. Accepting the responsibility of portraying Michael Jackson required extraordinary courage. Completing that journey demanded even more. Jaafar Jackson stepped into a role surrounded by impossible expectations, relentless comparisons, and worldwide scrutiny. Instead of allowing those pressures to define him, he transformed them into motivation. And in doing so, he accomplished something very few performers ever experience. He reminded the world that the most astonishing transformations are never created overnight. They are earned through patience, resilience, and the determination to keep improving long after everyone else has stopped watching. World saw Jaafar Jackson become Michael Jackson with their own eyes. Just when it seemed the conversation around Jaafar Jackson had reached its peak, another question quietly began replacing all the others. People stopped asking whether he looked like Michael Jackson. Instead, they started asking something far more important. What happens after this? Can an actor ever separate himself from a role this iconic, or does he spend the rest of his career living in its shadow? History has shown that portraying legendary figures can become both a blessing and a burden. Some actors build extraordinary careers afterward, while others struggle to escape the character that made them famous. For Jaafar, The challenge wasn't simply delivering one unforgettable performance. It was proving that his dedication represented who he was as an artist, not just what he could accomplish in a single film. The remarkable thing about his journey is that it never appeared driven by the desire for instant fame. If fame had been the goal, there were far easier paths available. He could have relied on the Jackson name, accepted constant media attention, or built a career around nostalgia alone. Instead, he spent years working quietly before the public ever noticed him. That patience says a great deal about his character. In an era where many careers are built on viral moments lasting only a few days, Jaafar invested his time in developing skills that audiences couldn't immediately see. Ironically, those invisible years became the very reason his transformation eventually shocked millions of people. The world celebrated the result, but the real achievement had taken place long before anyone started paying attention. One of the biggest reasons audiences connected with the story was because it reflected something universal. Everyone has experienced the pressure of expectations. Some people carry the expectations of their families. Others carry the expectations of society, employers, or even themselves. Jaafar happened to carry the expectations attached to one of the most recognizable surnames in music history. From childhood, comparisons were unavoidable. Every musical decision, every public appearance, and every creative project invited questions about Michael Jackson. Many people would have spent their lives trying to escape those comparisons. Instead, Jaafar confronted them directly. He accepted the very role most people believed would be impossible and trusted that preparation would speak louder than criticism. Another reason the transformation resonated so deeply is because audiences instinctively recognize authenticity. Modern filmmaking offers incredible technology capable of creating almost anything imaginable. Digital effects can reshape faces, recreate environments, and produce astonishing visual illusions. Yet audiences continue responding most strongly to genuine human effort. When viewers discovered how much time Jaafar had invested in studying movement, emotion, vocal delivery, and performance, many gained a greater appreciation for the work behind the finished film. Suddenly, the transformation no longer looked like a technical achievement. It looked like a personal one. Perhaps the greatest compliment an actor can receive is not applause but belief. For a few moments, audiences stop thinking about acting altogether. They stop analyzing performances and simply accept what they are seeing as real. Those moments cannot be manufactured through technology alone. They happen when preparation becomes invisible. Throughout the film, countless viewers experienced exactly that feeling. They weren't watching someone trying to imitate Michael Jackson. They were watching a performance convincing enough to make them forget comparisons and simply become absorbed in the story unfolding before them. The film also reminded audiences why Michael Jackson remained such an extraordinary cultural figure decades after his greatest performances. His influence extends far beyond record sales or awards. He changed choreography, music videos, stage production, fashion, and the relationship between artists and global audiences. Recreating even a small portion of that legacy required enormous respect. Jaafar understood that success wouldn't come from trying to surpass Michael. It would come from honoring the qualities that made him unforgettable in the first place. That humble approach earned admiration from many people who initially questioned whether anyone should attempt such a project at all. As conversations about the movie continue, one truth becomes increasingly clear. Jaafar Jackson's greatest accomplishment wasn't proving that he could resemble Michael Jackson. It was proving that dedication still matters. In an entertainment industry often obsessed with instant results, his journey stands as a reminder that meaningful achievements are usually built slowly. They demand discipline when nobody is watching, resilience when progress feels invisible, and confidence when public opinion seems impossible to change. Years from now, audiences may remember the costumes, the iconic performances, and the emotional scenes that brought Michael Jackson's story back to life. But behind every memorable moment stands another story. One about a young artist who accepted impossible expectations, embraced years of preparation, and transformed skepticism into admiration through determination alone. Whether people ultimately remember this film as a cinematic triumph, a heartfelt tribute, or the beginning of a remarkable acting career, one thing is already certain. Jaafar Jackson didn't simply play one of the greatest entertainers in history. He proved that extraordinary transformations are never accidents. They are the result of relentless effort, unwavering commitment, and the courage to pursue excellence even when the entire world is watching.